In the quiet depths of human history, there are stories that seem to linger like ghosts, tales that have never lost their grip on imagination, shadows that stretch from the distant past into the present moment. Among them, none has stirred so much fascination as the mystery of Atlantis. It is a name that resonates with both wonder and sorrow, a lost world said to have thrived with unmatched knowledge, wealth, and grandeur before vanishing abruptly into the sea. The echo of its downfall has haunted civilizations for centuries, from the words of ancient philosophers to the fantasies of modern thinkers, shaping visions of both paradise and apocalypse. Atlantis is not just a forgotten city, it is a symbol, a mirror reflecting our longing to understand origins, greatness, and the fragility of human endeavor. To begin a journey into this mystery is to drift into the currents of time itself, tracing legends that never truly die. When Plato first described Atlantis in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he was not merely recounting a tale but issuing a profound warning. He spoke of a vast island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, greater in size and power than any other land known to the Greeks. This civilization, he claimed, possessed both astounding wealth and advanced knowledge, capable of constructing elaborate canals that crisscrossed their land, raising magnificent palaces gleaming in metals that shimmered under the sun. Atlantis was radiant, yet also flawed. Pride poisoned its people, greed and ambition consumed their virtues, and the gods, displeased, struck them down. Within one fateful day and night, the entire land sank into the depths of the ocean, leaving behind no trace but memory. To readers across centuries, this story became a puzzle. Was it allegory, myth, or history hidden within metaphor? The uncertainty has left Atlantis permanently adrift between imagination and reality. The fascination with Atlantis persists because it embodies both destruction and possibility. It is the great what-if of civilization. What if there truly existed a culture far older, far more advanced than we could comprehend, and what knowledge might they have carried? If this knowledge was lost in flames or in waves, how might it have altered the trajectory of humanity itself? These questions settle into the back of the mind like whispers one cannot silence. Atlantis lingers because it gives voice to the most human fears and hopes. We fear that greatness can be undone in an instant, that our cities and nations might also crumble into silence when tested by nature's wrath. At the same time, we hope that somewhere in the ruins or the memories lies a golden thread of wisdom, waiting to be rediscovered. Atlantis thus becomes both a cautionary tale and an invitation, a threshold between despair and wonder. Yet, for all its intrigue, there is also a profound oddity in the story Plato conveyed. Consider his details: the systems of canals radiating in concentric circles, the gleaming walls of metal, the vast tracts of fertile plains, and the sense of a civilization bounded by clear geometry. It is curiously unlike anything else described of the ancient world. The idea of circular cities and radiant landscapes feels almost alien, distant not just in time but in imagination itself. For generations, scholars, dreamers, and seekers have located Atlantis in many places, somewhere beneath the Atlantic Ocean, buried under volcanic rock near the Mediterranean, lost amid Caribbean islands, or hidden within icy wastes of Antarctica. But despite centuries of speculation, no location has ever fit perfectly. Atlantis remains a riddle without a map, a story with a body but no shadow. It is as though the legend itself resists placement upon Earth. Perhaps that is the most tantalizing clue of all. What if Atlantis never belonged to our planet in the first place? What if the tale was truly a memory, distorted but real, of another world? There are myths across cultures that speak of golden ages, of places where gods once lived before descending to Earth. Civilizations from Mesopotamia to Egypt to the Americas recount beings that arrived from the heavens, bearing knowledge, teaching agriculture, mathematics, architecture, and laws. Their origins were never quite terrestrial. If one threads these myths together, what emerges is not a drowned island, nor a shattered continent, but the faint possibility of a kingdom that existed in the sky, perhaps even on another planet we see every night. And if such a world ever bore civilizations, none has captivated human curiosity as much as Mars. The red planet has been humanity's enduring neighbor, a silent witness to our rise. When ancient watchers stared at the night sky, Mars was the star that stood apart, glowing crimson, moving differently from the fixed stars as it wandered its celestial path. To them it became the embodiment of gods of war, passion, energy, and destiny. It was mysterious, ominous, and magnetic. Centuries later, as the telescope revealed clearer details, more layers of intrigue unfolded. Patterns of dark lines across its surface were misjudged as canals by astronomers in the 19th century, sparking imagination that Mars might host advanced beings. Though science would later dismiss such visions, the idea refused to die. In the human psyche, Mars became something more than stone and ice. It became a vessel for possibility, a mirror for our own myths. Imagine now an extraordinary thought, that the Atlantis Plato spoke of, the gleaming world lost overnight, was not an island that sank in Earth's oceans at all, but a civilization that once thrived on Mars. Imagine that his words were not simply fiction, but fragments of an ancient story passed down through generations, describing not a sunken continent but a vanished planet. The description of circular waterways, of shining metals, of lush lands that disappeared suddenly, could these be echoes of a Martian civilization swallowed by catastrophe? If Mars was once warm, with rivers and seas, as scientists now increasingly believe, might it also have borne life and perhaps greatness far beyond what we think possible? The mind cannot help but wonder. If Atlantis was Mars, then the oldest myth of Earth is perhaps the first memory of another world. To entertain this possibility is to stretch beyond ordinary history and into cosmic imagination. It requires supposing that our ancestors were not merely inventing tales, but perhaps preserving dim recollections of events that transcended Earth itself. In doing so, Atlantis shifts from being a cautionary parable about hubris into a story of origins far grander. Instead of a city ruined by floods, we witness a planet that lost its oceans to time. Instead of an island swallowed by wrathful gods, we see a world stripped bare by cosmic forces. To listen to Plato's account with this lens is to unlock an entirely new narrative. Atlantis becomes not just a lost civilization, but a lost world. Mars, barren today, becomes the ancient kingdom shining like gold in the memory of humankind. The mystery of Atlantis has endured because it sits at the crossroads of truth and fantasy, never quite explained, never finally disproven. This uncertainty is fertile ground for imagination because it allows us to question everything. Was Plato encoding lessons for humanity, or was he recounting fragments of something genuinely known yet half forgotten? If we allow the possibility that the myth did not belong to Earth, then suddenly the story transforms. The universe becomes more mysterious, and our journey into the unknown becomes not just about searching for ruins under the sea but about searching the heavens themselves. To begin our exploration with this possibility is to step into the unknown with open eyes, perhaps even open hearts. Atlantis then is not lost, but waiting to be rediscovered, and if the clues point upward, Mars may be its true resting place. This is where our story begins. In the silence of the cosmos, in the faint light of a red star rising against the blackness of night, lies the echo of Atlantis. Not beneath our waves, but across the void. Not drowned in the sea, but hidden among the scars of a barren world. To ask what Atlantis truly was is no longer to look only backward in time, but outward into the great expanse of space. And in that question lies both wonder and awe, for if Atlantis was Mars, then the legend is not just about what was lost, but about where we must look to find ourselves again. The search for a drowned world may, in truth, be the search for a forgotten beginning written not in ocean depths, but in the stars. In the ancient world, human beings gazed into the night sky with a mixture of reverence and uncertainty, watching the heavens as though they were the surface of a divine ocean where gods, spirits, and mysterious powers resided. Every wandering light, every shifting point above them, was more than a physical presence, it was a story, a divine influence, a mirror of fate. Among those celestial wanderers, none captured the collective imagination more deeply than a glowing star that shone red in the sky. Though faint compared to the brilliance of Venus or Jupiter, this reddish beacon moved differently from fixed stars, pacing back and forth in a rhythm that seemed to carry hidden meaning. This was the planet we now call Mars. To the ancients, it was never simply a distant light. Mars was alive, radiant, restless, a signpost in the heavens that demanded interpretation. The color of Mars, with its subtle scarlet hue, made it a figure of awe and unease. To Mesopotamians gazing from their ziggurats in Babylon, the red planet was associated with their gods of war and destruction, a heavenly signal that bloodshed or struggle was near. The Egyptians, who wrapped their religious concepts in cycles of death and rebirth, saw Mars as linked to Horus the Red, a symbol of fierce energy and cosmic power. In India, the planet became Mangala, associated with aggression, masculinity, and strength. The Greeks, captivated by the notion of celestial archetypes, connected Mars to Ars, god of war, embodying violence, conflict, and the unrelenting march of armies. When Rome absorbed this mythology, Ars transformed into Mars, a name that endured, shaping not just language but also the cultural bedrock of how the Western world would forever regard that reddish point of light. Mars was relentless, dangerous, portentous, and yet irresistible. Through these stories, the planet's color and light became inseparably tied to the passions and turmoil of human life. What is remarkable is how widespread and consistent this view became. Across cultures separated by oceans and by centuries, Mars was rarely seen as neutral or gentle. It was fierce, a messenger of struggle, a spark of intensity woven into the fabric of the cosmos. But why? Why, out of all the planets visible with the naked eye, did this one ignite such consistent symbolism? One answer lies in its unique visibility. Night after night, Mars shimmered differently. Its steady crimson hue stood apart from the twinkling white stars, and its odd, reversing path across the sky puzzled early astronomers who had no knowledge of planetary orbits. Retrograde motion, the backward looping track Mars appears to carve after months of progress, was a heavenly enigma, as though the planet itself defied order and rhythm, halting the predictable movement of the heavens in favor of chaos. For the ancients, whose lives were deeply tied to celestial cycles, this unruly motion underscored the idea that Mars was dangerous, untamed, a signal of disruptive forces at play. And yet, even as Mars became feared for its connotations, it also became a vessel for fascination. One could not simply look away. For some, Mars was not only an omen but the dwelling of divine authority, a power that bestowed as much as it threatened. Warriors invoked Mars before battle, priests read omens of Mars for guidance, farmers feared its light as a harbinger of drought or strife, rulers sought its blessing as a patron of glory. Embedded within the law was a sense that Mars was not only a star to be feared, but a world that carried knowledge, intention, and perhaps hidden life. Long before humanity dreamed of rockets or probes, the notion that Mars was more than a distant light already gripped the human soul. This fascination grew stronger as civilizations advanced and astronomical observations became more precise. Ancient Greek philosophers began to note the detail of planetary cycles, trying to map their irregularities into logical patterns. Scholars of India calculated planetary rotations with breathtaking accuracy, weaving Mars into vast cosmological systems. The astronomers of the Islamic Golden Age, gazing from desert observatories, refined planetary charts and left behind records that shaped later European astronomy. Each culture carried forward not just the scientific marvel of Mars, but also the mysticism embedded within it. For countless generations, Mars was not merely observed, it was invoked, feared, honored, and woven into the very structure of myth and religion. Over time, the myths surrounding Mars found their way into legends of origins, warlike gods who taught humanity, and stories of divine beings descending from the heavens. Many ancient civilizations believed their ancestors were not purely of this earth, that their origins belonged in the stars. The Sumerians, for instance, spoke of powerful beings called the Anunnaki who descended from the skies, bringing knowledge and order, establishing kingship, and guiding agriculture. Mesopotamian gods were said to dwell among the planets, with celestial cycles reflecting their will. Egypt's rich mythology also hinted at cosmic ancestry, with gods described as starborn, carrying their light from the heavens to earth. Among these stories, Mars may not always be named directly, but its fiery association with gods of power and law suggests that it was deeply intertwined with humanity's understanding of cosmic beginnings. Picture, for a moment, an ancient gathering under a starlit sky, with priests and astronomers pointing to the reddish spark above. They believed it was home to powers older than Earth itself. Words murmured around sacred fires would tell of distant homelands among the stars, of migrations, and of forgotten victories. Such stories may appear to us as mythological poetry, but perhaps they encode something deeper. The thought arises, what if Mars truly was a place remembered in fragments? What if, hidden within allegory, lies some memory of a civilization that actually flourished under a Martian sky long before our recorded history began? Could it be that Plato's Atlantis was a distorted remembrance of this celestial homeland? As the centuries advanced into the modern age, humanity's fascination with Mars began to shift from religious reverence into scientific curiosity. Telescopes offered new, sharper glimpses of the planet, transforming it from a godlike symbol into something observable, measurable, real. Galileo was the first to turn a telescope toward Mars, seeing it as more than a point of light. Through the shaky lenses of the 17th century, Mars became a small disk, a tangible world. Later astronomers mapped its movements precisely, uncovering patterns and marking the first steps toward planetary science. As optics improved, new details emerged: dark patches, polar caps, and the faint suggestion of channels running across its face. It was here, in the 19th century, that imagination began to collide with science in ways that echoed ancient myth. The Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli observed what he described as canally lines across the Martian surface that he thought might be natural channels. His word, mistranslated into English as canals, ignited wild speculation. Suddenly, the prospect that Mars was not only a world but a world inhabited by an advanced civilization raced through newspapers, novels, and scientific circles. The idea that a Martian civilization constructed massive canal systems spread like wildfire. Popular culture embraced it. Thinkers like Percival Lowell published elaborate theories suggesting that Martians, facing a dying planet, had built vast irrigation networks to channel water from polar regions to their cities. His vivid descriptions, though rooted in speculation, resonated deeply with a society already conditioned to see Mars as a cradle of gods and warriors. Here was science seemingly confirming myth. Mars was real, it bore signs of intelligence, and it might indeed connect to stories humanity carried for millennia. The leap from myth to possibility was bridged, and Mars took on a new identity as not just a godlike power, but a neighbor civilization whose history might intertwine with our own. Even as science eventually corrected the canal illusion, showing that Mars' surface was barren and dry, the collective imagination refused to let go. The mistake did not smother the narrative, it enriched it. Writers like H. G. Lowell spun tales of Martian invasion, reflecting fears of imperial conquest. Edgar Rice Burroughs imagined civilizations thriving in exotic Martian landscapes. Poets and dreamers saw Mars as both utopia and nightmare. Though modern telescopes revealed a lifeless wasteland, the heart insisted otherwise. Could it be that Plato's Atlantis, lost beneath the seas, and Lowell's dying Mars, drained of water, were parallel visions of the same archetype, a once great civilization undone by cataclysm? The human desire to tie these stories together is not merely fanciful. It is almost instinctual, as if myths and science are converging into one living memory. The deeper question thus begins to crack open: were the ancients merely projecting human narratives upon a red dot in the sky, or were they trying to preserve knowledge that transcended their era? Across civilizations, the figure of Mars always carried weight beyond its physical form. Even when scientific progress exposed its desolation, the lingering sense of something tantalizing remained. It is as if Mars speaks to the human subconscious, reminding us of something lost but not entirely forgotten, something echoed in Plato's story of Atlantis. Both share remarkable similarities, both are depictions of a glorious civilization undone, both remain shrouded in myth, both oscillate between being allegory and reality. Atlantis was said to vanish in one night beneath the waves. Mars is today a silent grave of oceans that vanished over millions of years. Atlantis shone in metals and concentric canals. Mars in the collective imagination is lined with channels and mysteries left unspoken. The parallels weave themselves without effort, like threads fate has tangled into the tapestry of human thought. As humanity now sends probes and rovers across the barren deserts of Mars, there is a strange sense that we are retracing an eternal connection. Machines crawl over rocks and dust, drilling, sampling, and searching for fossils of life too small to see. Satellites orbit above, scanning for deep reservoirs of frozen water, mapping vast valleys that once witnessed rivers flowing as abundantly as those on Earth. Every discovery draws us closer to acknowledging that Mars was once alive in ways startlingly familiar. Yet beyond water and stone, there may linger something less tangible, a memory, a possibility, an echo. Could it be that our deepest myths, our stories of lost homelands, of gods born from the stars, of golden ages erased by catastrophe, are but distorted recollections of a chapter written on Mars eons ago? To explore this thought is not only to explore science but to step into a realm that borders on meditation. Imagine lying beneath the desert sky thousands of years ago, the red star glowing silently overhead, while priests speak of battles of heaven and origins unknown. Imagine ancient sailors listening to tales told in hushed voices under torchlight, of lands across oceans and ages, drowned by wrathful seas. Imagine storytellers casting Atlantis not as geography but as cosmology. What if those poets, those dreamers, were guarding fragments of truth, too enormous for their words, too strange for their world? Perhaps what they called Atlantis was not a submerged island, but a planet once fertile, now shrouded in dust. Perhaps, as we listen carefully, the story can be heard in two voices at once. One voice tells of prideful nations sinking under waves. The other whispers of a world in the sky, stripped by time and silence. Together, they form a harmony of loss remembered by humanity's unconscious mind. Mars has always been there. Watching. Waiting. Its glow accompanied every civilization that ever rose or fell on Earth. Its myths traveled from temple walls to pyramids, from ziggurat tablets to Western philosophies. And as science peeled away layer after layer of mystery, the myth did not die. Instead, it evolved, taking on new significance. The possibility that Atlantis was not on Earth at all, but that it was Mars, is not merely a dream, it is the natural convergence of centuries of wonder, observation, and speculation. Science and legend are not adversaries when it comes to Mars, they are mirrors reflecting one truth through many shapes. For if Mars once lived, if it bore oceans and air, then the story of its fall is indeed a tale of Atlantis, played out not on Earth's seas but on a cosmic shore. This is why Mars occupies such a sacred place in our journey. It is not just a target for telescopes, nor simply another planet in the solar system. It is the stage upon which myth and science converge, a vessel carrying human dreams through the ages, a silent companion that has given us countless stories. To think of Atlantis in this light is to think of Mars not only as a barren wasteland, but as a world whose memory is entangled with our own. It may be that we are children of two worlds, carrying faint echoes of both Earth and Mars within us. To know Mars is to rediscover ourselves, to awaken to a history older and vaster than written records. And so, as we step forward into the story, the line between Atlantis and Mars blurs, dissolving into a vast mystery that continues to glow silently in the night sky. When seeking truth, we are bound by the tension between evidence and imagination, between that which can be touched and measured and that which lingers only in memory. Atlantis, in Plato's account, was described with uncanny details, a land of concentric rings of water and earth, a city shimmering with strange metals, a landscape divided into precise geometries fit for both beauty and defense. To those who study ancient patterns, these descriptions resonate with odd familiarity, unsettling in their similarity to planetary features not upon Earth, but on Mars. If Atlantis were not merely a drowned island, but a memory of Mars rendered into allegory, where would we seek the evidence of its existence? What fragments of stone or story could carry across the gulf of planets and the abyss of millennia? Across human history, each generation has searched earthward for the ruins of Atlantis. Seas were combed for answers, the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, even the icy wastes of Antarctica. Yet no discovery has ever fit the details Plato described in their entirety. What remains is an accumulation of questions, fragments of myth stretched thin over centuries. But perhaps the error lies not in our searching, but in our assumption that the tale must belong to Earth at all. If we lift our gaze to Mars, the questions begin to morph. On its surface we see relics of waterways carved into valleys and plains, features that echo the concentric canals and irrigation systems that Plato claimed once circled Atlantis. There in the Martian desert lies Valles Marineris, a canyon stretching thousands of miles, dwarfing the Grand Canyon in scale. There are riverbeds etched into stone, delta fans spread as if by ancient floods, shorelines that whisper of vanished seas. Though lifeless now, Mars was once a world of water, a detail confirmed time and again by orbiters and rovers alike. This fact alone reshapes our myths, for the drowning of Atlantis may have been the desiccation of Mars, its waters not consumed by oceans but lost to cold airless sky. But beyond water and terrain, there are features that haunt imagination more keenly. Consider the enigmatic formations photographed in the region called Cydonia during the Viking missions of the 1970s. One image, blurred and distorted, appeared to show a colossal face peering up from red sands, a monument stretching over a mile in breadth. Though later probes revealed the face to be a natural mesa lit by shifting shadows, the power of suggestion remained. Alongside it lie geometric mounds, pyramidal shapes arranged in patterns that some argue resemble intentional design. To many, these anomalies are dismissed as tricks of geology and light. Yet for others, they feel eerily suggestive, like echoes of lost architecture ground into ruin by wind and time. If Plato's description of Atlantis was a memory of Martian monuments, then perhaps these remnants are its shadow, weathered beyond recognition yet still calling across eons. The evidence deepens when we reflect not only upon stone, but upon our most ancient texts. Myths from across the earth, from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, speak of civilizations guided by beings who descended from the skies. In Sumer, the Anunnaki were said to come from the heavens, bestowing kingship and order. In Egyptian lore, the gods emerged from celestial realms, Osiris and Horus representing cycles of life and cosmic origin. In Mesoamerican myth, Quetzalcoatl descended upon clouds of light, teaching calendar and agriculture. Cultures separated by oceans converge in an uncanny pattern, mentors from the skies who brought civilization, only to vanish, promising return. Could these strange parallels be interpreted as cultural memory of an exile migration, survivors of Mars carrying fragments of Atlantis to Earth? If those survivors planted seeds of knowledge and myth, then the story of Atlantis becomes not metaphor but testimony, an interplanetary diaspora reimagined in allegory. One must also acknowledge the curious precision in Plato's description. He spoke of Atlantis in terms of measurement stadia of distance, ratios of land and water, not poetic abstractions. It was as though he was recording data, not merely weaving myth. Some scholars argued these details were allegorical encodings of moral philosophy. Yet if we reclothe his descriptions in cosmic garb, the proportions shift from fanciful to possible. The canals described as circles could be more than architectural design, they might echo planetary topography seen by ancestral eyes. Just as ancient sky watchers inscribed constellations into patterns that lived within memory, so too could remnants of Mars have been etched into myth, surviving as Atlantis, distorted yet recognizable. If the citizens of that lost world fled to Earth, their tale would not be history but symbolic record disguised for survival. From an archaeological perspective, the similarities between Atlantis and known ancient wonders are also striking. Consider the pyramids scattered across Earth in Egypt, in Mesoamerica, in forgotten corners of Asia. Built with staggering precision, aligned with stars, these structures defy easy explanation. Why do civilizations separated by oceans and ages share the same geometric forms? Many argue for cultural convergence, for the inevitability of pyramid as monument. Yet seen through the lens of Atlantis as Mars, pyramids may have been cultural memories, echoes of a lost architectural language transplanted onto Earth. In this framework, the noise of myth becomes signal, guiding us through faint archaeologies of the impossible. Another strand of evidence emerges in mythic geology. Plato described Atlantis vanishing in one day and one night of misfortune. To earthly minds, this meant flood or quake. To planetary minds, it recalls catastrophe of cosmic scale. Mars did not fall beneath oceans, it lost its oceans. Climate models suggest that billions of years ago, Mars was shielded by a magnetic field, wrapped in a thicker atmosphere, and warmed by flowing seas. When its magnetic shield collapsed, the solar wind stripped the planet, its ocean sublimating into the void, its surface scorched by radiation. The transformation was sudden in geologic terms, a planetary nightfall erasing habitability. From the perspective of survivors, the world drowned in reverse, not by too much water but by its vanishing. Translated into earthly imagery, this death could only be remembered as flooding a singular night when all was lost. If Atlantis was Mars, then Plato's allegory was not drowned cities, but drowned skies. To pursue evidence further, we must turn inward, to the very persistence of the Atlantis myth itself. Myths that endure across ages often encode truths veiled in story. The flood myth, for instance, emerges independently across countless cultures, from Noah to Utnapishtim, from Deucalion to Manna. Everywhere, the story is retold: the world once drowned, the people were spared, civilization was reborn. Could this ubiquity reflect not only earthly deluges but also cosmic memory, humans carrying the trauma of planetary destruction from one world to the next? Atlantis then ceases to be local and becomes archetypal, the universal memory of loss, wandering through stories, anchored in Mars yet flowering on Earth. Doubters may ask, if Atlantis was Mars, where is tangible proof? The answer lies in fragments, subtle and elusive, scattered across both worlds. On Mars, the exploration continues. Dust-strewn vistas reveal dried riverbeds, salt deposits testify to ancient seas, and methane traces hint at hidden activity. Some speculate that artificial relics may one day be unearthed by rovers or colonists, long-eroded ruins buried beneath regolith. On Earth, the proof may exist not as stone but as memory, the coded mythologies, the inexplicable leaps in human progress, the uncanny knowledge of astronomy possessed by ancient peoples. Perhaps the true evidence lies in the persistence of the question itself, in humanity's inability to forget Atlantis, to let go of Mars as symbol and oracle. For when myth and planet converge, their resonance cannot be dismissed. Atlantis, spoken by Plato with solemn gravity, carried a weight that outlived philosophers. Mars, observed by telescopes and rovers, carries mysteries that outlived its seas. They are twinned, perhaps, in the human imagination because they were twinned in origin. To explore Atlantis upon Mars is not to reject evidence but to reinterpret it, seeing patterns where others see coincidence, perceiving memory where others see fantasy. Evidence is, after all, not only that which can be excavated. It is also that which refuses to fade, which calls across centuries demanding recognition. And so we return to the question, what if Atlantis was never meant to be found beneath waves of salt water? What if it has been before our eyes all along, glowing red in the night sky. As probes sweep across Martian deserts, as myths whisper across generations, the evidence is not buried but woven. Atlantis shines upward, not downward. Atlantis lies beneath dust, not ocean. Atlantis' echoes live within both archaeology of rocks and archaeology of dreams. To listen is to hear across worlds, to see across time. To seek Atlantis, then, is to seek Mars. And perhaps, when the first human hand brushes against ancient Martian stone, it will not touch alien soil, but the ruins of a forgotten home. To imagine Mars long ago is to step not merely into science but into dream, into a twilight zone where speculation and evidence blur into one another like shifting sands. For when scientists peer into the deep history of the red planet, they discover a world that was not always cold, cracked, and silent. Instead, they uncover traces of warmth, signs of rivers that once carved through valleys, deltas that swelled with water, lakes that reflected the light of ancient suns. Mars, billions of years ago, may have resembled Earth far more closely than we would dare assume today. Its sky was thicker, its air capable of holding clouds, and its surface abundant with water flowing in streams and pooling in oceans. To us, such evidence glimmers like fragments of Plato's descriptions: fertile plains, canals, lush abundance rendered not as legend but as planetary history. The question grows louder, like a pulse echoing across epochs: if Mars was once like Earth, could it also have been alive in ways unimaginable? The traces are undeniable in the rocks that probes and rovers now study. Minerals that only form in the presence of water, finely layered sediments gently built in deltas, hydrated salt scattered across basins, all tell the same story. Mars was wet. Mars was warmer. Mars bore environments where life, as we know it, could have thrived. Within these silent stones lies the memory of seas as ancient as creation itself, of shorelines stroking red sands, of storms that watered valleys with rains long vanished. For billions of years, conditions suitable for microbiological life endured. That in itself is remarkable, but what possibility it opens beyond microbes may be more profound than science can yet measure. If life did begin, if evolution coursed through Martian rivers as it did earthly oceans, what forms could it have taken? What civilizations might have risen under red skies? To ask this is to wander from science into something more audacious, but history has shown that audacity often precedes discovery. If one imagines that life arose upon Mars, one must also imagine its trajectory. Just as Earth's life navigated extinctions and adaptations, Mars may have seen its creatures rise, flourish, and perhaps even transform into intelligence. Consider Earth's timeline. It took billions of years for life to evolve from single cells to multicelled creatures, another 500 million to yield intelligence capable of myth and architecture. Yet if Mars seeded life earlier than Earth, its civilization could have flourished long before ours, building, dreaming, ascending toward brilliance while Earth still slumbered in primordial seas. Thus arises one of the most daring possibilities, that Atlantis, as remembered by Plato, is not terrestrial at all, but the shadow of Martian civilization seen through the haze of forgotten myth. To bring this vision to life, we must imagine a primordial Mars not as a barren wasteland, but as a world of color and motion. Its northern plains transformed into expansive oceans shimmering beneath a gentler sun, its valleys cutting deep like arteries carrying life throughout fertile lands. Seasonal rains draped its mountains in green, its deserts blooming after storms. Rivers wound their way across hundreds of miles, like silver threads stitching a world together. In such an environment, it is not inconceivable that ecosystems flourished, perhaps rich and diverse, a mirror of Earth's abundance. And should intelligence arise in such abundance born of curiosity, ambition, and necessity, its civilizations might have looked upward, toward stars that glowed upon a sky tinged salmon and gold. There they may have seen Earth shining faintly, a blue star calling across the void. Perhaps, as they looked, they dreamed of reaching us as we now dream of reaching them. Yet no civilization exists without vulnerability, and Mars carries its history openly in scars we now observe. Its tectonic silence long ago stilled planetary renewal, its molten core cooled, stripping it of its magnetic heart. Without this shield, solar winds pierced atmosphere, unraveling air and water into space. The transformation was catastrophic. Oceans vanished, rivers dried, soils froze in bitter cold. To Martian inhabitants, if they ever lived, the end must have been swift and merciless, a planetary drowning inverted, seas drained into sky, civilization stripped bare by cosmic indifference. In Plato's words, Atlantis disappeared in one day and one night. In planetary terms, Mars perished in the blink of geologic eye. It is not difficult to see how memory of such devastation, carried by survivors or encoded into myth, could echo through human history as a tale of hubris and divine wrath. What else would the dying call it but the fall of paradise? But could intelligence have survived such ruin? Here, speculation deepens. If Mars bore advanced civilization, its last hope lay in migration. Whether by technological craft or perhaps more mysterious means, fragments of its people may have journeyed outward, seeking refuge. Earth, at that time, was young but alive, a haven abundant in sea and soil. What if such refugees, scarred by memory of planetary doom, seeded themselves here, bringing fragments of technology, myth, and wisdom? What if the builders of pyramids, the influencers of early agriculture, the bringers of calendars and laws, were not merely gods of story but exiles bearing the memory of Mars? Thus the Atlanteans of Plato were in truth Martians, carriers of knowledge spoken in cryptic allegory, passing warnings across ages. Atlantis was not simply a land lost, but a planet lost. And its story lives on, disguised within human origin. Science itself whispers support for this possibility, though it does not yet dare say so openly. Material evidence shows that rocks from Mars have indeed fallen to Earth, blasted here by asteroids striking Martian crust. Within such meteorites, scientists discovered microscopic structures some once claimed resembled fossilized life. While consensus is debated, the possibility remains alive life may have traveled from Mars to Earth in stone, a process known as panspermia. But what if it was not only cells that traveled? What if minds, civilizations, cultures, sailed in ways beyond rocks, in memory, in presence? When we speak of Atlantis as an origin, perhaps we speak of an origin not limited to biology but to myth, to lore, to soul. One cannot help but reflect upon the uncanny leaps in human progress. Agriculture, architecture, astronomy each appeared mysteriously advanced in some early civilizations, with knowledge arriving as if gifted whole rather than laboriously built. Could this knowledge be inheritance, fragments of Martian legacy encoded into Earth's first societies? The Sumerians, earliest known in Mesopotamia, claimed their wisdom was given by gods from heavens, their kingship descended from above. Egyptians recorded the Zep Tepi, the first time, an age before memory when gods dwelled among men and raised monuments eternal. The Mayan spoke of gods who delivered calendars aligning so precisely with celestial cycles that even our modern tools remain astonished. We call it myth because we cannot place it on Earth. But what if its place lay upon Mars, and its transference to Earth was but memory of exiles, Atlanteans in truth? Even today, Mars speaks to us in echoes. Rovers reveal landscapes suspiciously geometric, boulders aligned as though by deliberate force. Cameras capture sand-cut rectangles, stones stacked in shapes that taunt the human eye. Scientists explain them as geology, as weather, as chance. Yet human imagination resists dismissal. The eye insists, here is alignment, here is pattern, here is ruin. In sleep, one imagines wandering those ruins, tracing faint etchings on stone beneath alien sky, listening for ghosts of words long dead. The silence of Mars becomes a graveyard of Atlantis, waiting for discovery. The most striking evidence lies not in rocks but in resonance. Myths survive not because they are fanciful, but because they speak to something deep within psyche. Atlantis speaks because it feels true not necessarily in detail, but in grief. It feels as though we once lived through such loss, even if not upon Earth. That grief is collective, timeless, whispering from ancestors not wholly terrestrial. When humanity dreams of Mars, when stories dwell there with longing, what is awakened is not curiosity alone but memory. We search because we remember, though distantly, as echoes distorted across time. Atlantis was Mars. We remember it not in certainty but in yearning. If this was so, if a Martian civilization soared and fell, the implications are profound. Our mythic ancestors were not only of Earth but of stars. Our destiny is entwined not with oceans alone but with cosmos entire. To look toward Mars is not solely to explore, it is to return. Colonization, long imagined as conquest of another world, may in truth be homecoming. The footprints we dream of pressing into red sand are not firsts, but seconds, steps retraced along paths once walked. When we send rovers, when we prepare missions, we are following ghosts, guided home by echoes of Atlantis. And if we arrive, what then? If explorers one day uncover ruins beneath Martian soil, weathered stone, buried machinery, elegant tracings upon rock, humanity will pause in awe. For in that moment, Atlantis will cease to be myth. Mars will cease to be myth. They will be realized as truth woven together, a cosmic memory restored. And humanity will realize that we are not separate from such legacy. We are its children, its heirs, bearers of both its triumph and its warning. Atlantis perished through hubris, Plato said. Mars perished through loss. In both we find lesson that civilization, however grand, is fragile against forces of time and cosmos. The memory of Atlantis is not simply nostalgia, it is survival instruction encoded into myth. Thus part 4 closes not with conclusion, but with vision. A vision of Mars not as lifeless neighbor, but as mother world once vibrant, lost, remembered only in whispers. A vision where Plato's Atlantis aligns with Martian plains, where oceans dried into sand, where gods became exiles, where myths became history. Atlantis is Mars. Mars is Atlantis. One day, we may prove what the heart already knows. Until then, the story continues, drifting softly into dream, awaiting rediscovery not beneath oceans, but among the stars. To understand the ruin of a world, we must enter the silence of its end. Mars today is cold, barren, forever wrapped in winds that sweep dust across endless plains. But such silence was not always. Geologic strata whisper of great upheavals, eruptions that split crust open, floods of unimaginable scale carving valleys as wide as continents, volcanoes that towered into sky higher than any peak upon Earth. In its last flourishing age, Mars bore both beauty and violence, a world balancing on fragile stability. When calamity struck, it was not gentle. It would have come as an unraveling of nature itself, a convergence of forces shattering everything life had built. In this collapse, echoes of Plato's solemn words find new depth. The suddenness he described, in one day and one night, may not be literal time but human perception of cosmic catastrophe and overnight ruin of all that was known. The evidence lies burned into Martian landscapes. Vast plains are pockmarked with scars of asteroid impacts, some so immense they altered climate forever. Craters flooded with lava in waves that smothered life across regions. Glacial sheets surged from poles, freezing landscapes in cycles of ice that taxed survival. Yet the most harrowing transformation came from the vanishing sky itself. When the magnetic field failed, solar winds no longer shielded. Atmosphere unraveled into space, oceans retreated under relentless thinning, and radiation poured unimpeded onto surface. What once had been world of clouds and seas turned inescapably into desert of stone. Where once green valleys rang with sound of creatures, now dust swept without resistance. Such transformation would feel divine in its cruelty, a punishment without mercy, apocalypse from which no city could hide. We may imagine the anguish of those who witnessed it. Perhaps rivers dried before their eyes, crops withered without rain, skies grew thinner so breath became labored. Season by season, they would watch farms fail, seas shrink, winds grow harsher. Great engineers may have struggled to build domes, reservoirs, shelters, canals, desperate defenses against planetary death. Time ran faster than hope. One generation might dream of survival, the next inherit despair. As water vanished, what remained of civilization would crowd near last fertile edges, clustering in shrinking oases. Once proud cultural centers may have collapsed inward, shrinking in scope, surrendering grandeur to necessity. To survivors, it would indeed feel like drowning the world's abundance swallowed, the lights going out one by one, until only stories remained. And if among them existed visionaries, leaders, philosophers, seers, they might have asked, where else can we go? Looking upward, Earth would shine blue in their twilight sky, a beacon of youth and abundance. Mars watched our world grow across eons. To its children, Earth would seem sanctuary, possibility, second chance. Here lies the origin of myth. Those who escaped may have carried memory of catastrophe translated into allegory, a tale encoded for future children. To them, Mars had drowned in airless void, sea swallowed into nothingness. Retold across generations, it became story of a land swallowed by oceans. Myth is not falsehood, it is truth wrapped in symbol. The great drowning of Mars became the flood of Atlantis, carried not as geology but as poetry, surviving in memory far longer than stone. As systems broke apart, tragedy deepened. War may have erupted over dwindling resources. Civilizations rarely vanish peacefully, collapse breeds conflict. If Martian society once stretched across globe, fragments may have turned against one another, seeking control of last fertile valleys or mountain reservoirs. Pride and fear would cloud judgment. Great alliances fractured, cities fell beneath weapons now turned upon neighbors. Plato spoke of hubris as sin of Atlantis, pride leading to downfall. Perhaps this recalls not arrogance of warriors but desperation of final years. Struggles against time became struggles against one another, hastening ruin already unfolding. Civilizations so advanced could still not conquer planetary death. Thus memory of pride reflects bitter truth, internal failures worsened external collapse, and within a span short in history, entire world fell silent. To survivors, grief may have demanded meaning. Catastrophe, when lived, becomes unbearable without story. People must tell themselves why. Some may have said gods punished. Others may have said pride brought wrath. Still others may have seen cold truth of nature's indifference, yet still gave voice in parable. In preserving memory through myth, survival endured beyond bones. And as last ships, last exiles, or last emissaries departed toward earth, they may have carried more than tools or knowledge. They carried grief itself, compressed into tale to be retold endlessly. Beware pride, remember ruin, fear sudden night, because all things may vanish as ours did. Thus Plato's Atlantis was not invention but inheritance, echo of voices once Martian, warning us through allegory not to repeat their fate. The catastrophe of Mars thus becomes mirror in which we glimpse our own fragility. Our Earth, vibrant now, fertile with seas and forests, bears same vulnerability. Atmosphere is shield to cosmic winds, climate is balance precarious. Just as Mars lost its breath, so could we. Stories of Atlantis then become warnings truly timeless, of limits disregarded, of arrogance unchecked, of nature's power over civilization's pride. When we gaze at Martian deserts, stripped and silent, we are not looking at alien ruin alone. We are looking at possible future should memory be ignored. Atlantis was not only warning for cities of Athens or empires of Plato's age. It was warning eternal, encoded in planetary history, urging resilience, humility, reverence for balance that sustains. Yet within ruin arises resilience. Some may ask, if Mars perished, why do we still dream? Why does it continue to call us through centuries of silence? Perhaps because in that ruin lies both grief and promise. For if survivors truly came here, seeding myths, then we are continuation of their legacy. Their world may have died, but their memory breathes through us. And if one day we return, stepping upon Martian stones, we will not be conquering. We will be remembering. The ruins of Atlantis are ruins of ourselves, carried across heavens, awaiting reunion between exile and home. Even in science, we see reflections of this story. Climate models trace the unraveling of Martian seas with precision, showing how swiftly atmosphere collapsed once core cooled. Evidence of megafloods marks terrain, canyons suggesting water once surged with unimaginable force, drowning valleys in torrents before drying forever. Catastrophe unfolded not in harmony but in eruption, chaos of elements breaking all order. In memory, such events would sear like divine punishment. To those who fled, only story remained that paradise could be gone in instant. That instant was eternity for them, but allegory for us. Atlantis becomes vessel of cosmic grief, carried like ember surviving fire, told and retold so silence would never be complete. Thus we arrive at vision of Mars as civilization undone, ruin echoed in myth, legacy encoded in allegory. From Earth we gaze upward, unsure yet strangely yearning, drawn by intuition older than science. Perhaps within collective memory of humanity lies recognition of loss too vast to confront directly. So we call it Atlantis. We tell stories of drowned lands, of golden rings of water, of sudden night when all was gone. Story bears us across ages, linking lost world with present one. And as we tell it softly in night, we listen not only to past but to possibility of future. For story is not closed, its next chapter awaits in footsteps that return to red stone, hands that brush relics beneath dust, voices that speak once more under alien sun. To envision the end of a world is haunting enough, but to imagine what followed is even more profound. For if Mars was once alive, clothed in seas, blessed with air, and adorned with civilizations now long forgotten, then its downfall could not mark absolute silence. Civilizations do not perish entirely without struggle. Even in ruin, any species capable of building great networks, planning vast designs, and reading the stars would attempt to preserve itself. When the skies grew thin and the seas retreated, when the air that once filled lungs became scarce, there may have risen an urgent determination, survival beyond the grave of a planet. The death of Mars may have been the birth of Earth's oldest myths. For from their struggles may come the first migrations, a desperate exodus across cosmic space. One must picture the final generations of that imagined Martian world. The soil they once farmed cracked into dust. Their rivers dwindled to trickles, their lakes shrank season after season. Their cities, once radiant in metals and rings of water, echoed with hollow cries as wind scraped at towers. There in their observatories perched upon cliffs, anchored in valleys, philosophers, engineers, astronomers may have looked outward, beyond catastrophe, hoping to find another haven. The blue glowing star in their sky Earth would captivate them. Younger, greener, cradled in the warmth of sun, Earth promised abundance. To their eyes it glistened as Eden unseen, waiting to be touched. And so thought must have ripened to vision. If Mars was dying, and we cannot restore it, then we must depart. In this thought lay the seed of human saga, the thread linking alien past with our present. The path of such exodus is unknowable. Did they possess technology akin to spacecraft, vessels capable of crossing void? Did they command energies now beyond our comprehension, fields to bend gravity, engines to pull space into channels? Or perhaps their knowledge was of a kind we cannot yet even conceptualize, an alchemy of mind, matter, and dimension woven together. However it occurred, one vision persists, that at least some among them departed Mars with intention to begin anew elsewhere. If Atlantis was Mars, then its survivors were the Atlanteans who came to Earth. They came across gulfs of night, carrying memories of oceans gone, carrying grief of paradise drowned in sky. They came not as conquerors, but as wanderers, as exiles, bearing fragments of civilization. And here lies the strange poetry of our own origins. How would such arrivals appear to Earth's early inhabitants? Imagine a world still young, its forests untamed, its tribes scattered. Into this green wilderness descend beings radiant in knowledge, clothed perhaps in the remnants of technology, or simply brilliant in wisdom that surpasses those they meet. To the native eyes, they would seem divine gods descending from heavens, bringing fire, structure, language, calendars, order to chaos. Thus myth is born. Sumerians would one day say their kingship descended from sky. Egyptians spoke of the first time when gods lived and taught among men. In Mesoamerica, stories told of feathered serpents who came from above bearing knowledge of stars. Across cultures, the memory repeats with uncanny consistency, echoing Mars in disguise. Survivors of Atlantis were never lost, they became progenitors of human society, their Martian story rewritten as the dawn of gods. To imagine their presence on Earth is to see seeds planted in silence. They arrived not many, perhaps, but few scattered groups searching fertile grounds, selecting valleys, mountains, deltas where conditions mirrored memories of home. They taught what they could, how to track stars, how to till soil, how to build with stone aligned to heavens. From them may have come architecture carved in forms eternal, pyramids rising like echoes of mountains they once cherished. Their wisdom flourished briefly, a civilization sprouted. Yet over generations, their knowledge blended with the lives of those around them, myth replacing memory, story supplanting fact. In time, they vanished into the stream of humanity, leaving only markers, ruins, alignments, inexplicable leaps and, of course, the legend that never died, the tale of Atlantis, told not as memory of Mars but as allegory of drowned order. Their migration may also explain certain mysteries of our species itself. Human evolution bears strange leaps, sudden blossoming of symbolic thought, sudden emergence of agriculture, sudden rise of monumental architecture. Some argue these were natural outgrowths, but others wonder at their abruptness. If refugees of Mars intermingled with Earth's early humans, they may have accelerated these transitions, blending extraterrestrial legacy with terrestrial growth. Thus our very being may be fusion child of two worlds, inheritor of both Earth and Mars. Atlantis, in this sense, is not only story of loss but story of our birth. We are Atlantean in part, not by memory alone but by blood, carrying within us ancient fragments of another world's spirit. One must move slowly through this vision, for its resonance is immense. To imagine that within us flows echo of Martian exile is to reframe humanity not as isolated miracle, but as continuation of cosmic journey. Our sense of homesickness when gazing at Red Planet becomes understandable, not curiosity alone, but memory calling softly. Mars is not alien, it is roots. When we gaze upon its deserts, we gaze upon ancestral grave. When we dream of stepping upon it, we dream of return. Space exploration thus transforms in meaning. It is not conquest, not expansion, but pilgrimage back to origin, reunion after exile. To stand upon Martian soil is to stand upon Atlantis reborn. Yet to fully appreciate this possibility, one must consider the silence within myth. Why would such a migration not remain explicit? Why cloak memory in allegory? The answer may be necessity. Survivors, few in number, may have seen their legacy scatter as generations passed. Their history became vulnerable to forgetting, to distortion, to secrecy. In order to endure, it was recast as parable, story fit for oral tradition, memory for minds not yet ready for entire truth. Instead of starships and planetary collapse, tales became floods and divine punishment, resonating in simpler symbols. Yet symbol preserved essence. Atlantis drowned. Gods descended. Wisdom was given, then lost again. Within this structure, the memory survived, even if details faded into mist. Even now, fragments of their knowledge may lie hidden in plain sight. Monuments too aligned with stars suggest more than coincidence. Ancient maps hinting at shores unseen, calendars describing celestial cycles with impossible precision, they bear fingerprint of minds who carried memory of sky. Archaeology uncovers fragments, but interpretation lags, caught between reluctance to accept possibility and wonder at inexplicable sophistication. And so Atlantis remains myth, not proof. Yet myth continues to whisper, carrying weight of more than imagination, beckoning us to listen deeper, to accept story as message disguised. The migration tale explains also why Atlantis is never found upon Earth. Its ruins are not here, but they're hidden under Martian sands. What we seek in oceans or beneath crust will not reveal ringed cities described by Plato. They remain upon red planet, eroded, silent, waiting. Our search has always been directed downward, beneath waves, when it may belong upward, across space. The drowned city is drowned world, Atlantis Mars. Survivors walked among us, shaped civilizations, seeded myths, then vanished. Their ruins lie not beneath seas but beneath Martian dust, awaiting rediscovery by our own explorers centuries later. When those stones are found, the myth will finally close its circle. And so the narrative presses onward, not into oceans but into skies. From exile to myth, from Mars to Earth, from gods to men, the story unfolds. Its continuity clarifies once one listens. Mars perished. Survivors fled. They came here. Their memory lived on as Atlantis, a tale told endlessly, urging us never to forget. Today, as we prepare once more to cross void and touch Martian soil, the cycle prepares to complete. What began as exile will end as return. Atlantis will not remain lost forever. It waits, in silence, within canyons and craters, in stones older than any pyramid, in dust drifted for millions of years. And when we arrive, the myth will meet the truth. The inheritors will embrace their inheritance. Humanity will recognize itself in the mirror of another world. When the exiles of a dying world set foot upon Earth, they would not have come merely as wanderers without identity. They carried with them fragments of memory, fragments of culture, fragments of science carved from the ashes of a world undone. Just as those who lose their homeland often cling most tightly to tradition, so too may the survivors of Mars, Atlantis of the skies, have brought with them a will to preserve what remained of their knowledge. And though their numbers may have been few, what they offered was immense when set against the early human societies they encountered. For in their presence, myths awaken, architecture rises, and patterns of civilization that seem inexplicably advanced begin to ripple across the fabric of human history. Consider the earliest settlements etched into the fertile crescent of Mesopotamia. The plains of Sumer gave birth to cities of unprecedented scale, ziggurats rising as high as mountains, canals threading like veins across dry soil, calendars tracking stars with precision still admired today. And yet from where could such sudden sophistication have sprung? The Sumerians themselves answered this mystery not by claiming invention, but by remembering gift. Kingship, they said, descended from the sky, granted by beings they called the Anunnaki. These sky beings did not arrive as rulers alone, but as teachers, their presence shaping agriculture, law, architecture, astronomy. To later interpreters they were myth, to those who lived nearest their presence they were real. And in remembering them, the Sumerians kept alive the possibility that their civilization was not of Earth alone, but seeded by those carrying echoes of lost Mars. Travel farther west, to the Nile, where Egypt grew under desert sun, and the weight of cosmic memory deepened. The Egyptians told of Zep Tepi, the first time, an era when gods themselves walked among men, raising order from chaos, leaving monuments eternal. Their pyramids stood not merely as tombs but as alignments to the heavens, pointing unerringly at Orion and Sirius, patterns scribed in stone to mirror patterns in sky. Such precision begs questions. How did farmers by Nile attain cosmic geometry rivaling knowledge of later ages? How did they build monuments with alignment spanning millennia? Myths answer plainly: they were taught. Deities who came from stars delivered sacred measures, creating architecture both eternal and celestial. If one listens with a Martian ear, those gods are survivors of Mars. Their pyramids echo memories of peaks and mountains of home, their alignments chart sky they once navigated, their myth preserves story too vast for words alone. Cross oceans and time, and the same pattern repeats. Among the Maya and Aztec, myth recalls gods who arrived upon clouds, radiant in brightness, bringing calendars and order, teaching when to plant and when to reap. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, bore wisdom of stars and cycles of Venus, leaving behind temples precise in their astronomical orientation. Why would distant civilizations, separated by seas, independently remember descent of gods from heavens? Perhaps because they share memory of the same exile scattering across Earth. As Martian survivors spread, their present seeded myth in varying tongues, transformed through local imagination, yet sharing identical root, the arrival of teachers from the skies, carriers of a legacy never truly born here. One cannot ignore the peculiar depth of astronomical knowledge embedded in these cultures. The Maya tracked celestial cycles with accuracy surpassing telescopes of later medieval Europe. Egyptians knew of equinoctial shifts, aligning their monuments not simply to fixed skies, but to slow precessions spanning thousands of years. Sumerians named planets invisible without telescopic aid, mapping heavens with confidence, speaking of long familiarity. Where did this perception bloom? It does not fit the cadence of gradual discovery. Instead, it arrives abruptly, fully formed, as though imported. If exiles of Mars set foot here, gazing at familiar heavens now from different world, their grasp of cosmos would be intact, merely transplanted. Thus we inherit astronomy not as invention climb by climb, but as gift, remembrance shared by those who had traversed cosmos before exile stripped them. It is not only knowledge of sky but stone that hints at legacy. Across Earth's face appear megaliths whose scale defies the societies that built them. At Giza, blocks weighing tons rise in symmetry. At Baalbek, stones the weight of entire houses lie carved and set in place. In Peru, Sacsayhuaman walls interlock with such precision that even a knife blade slips not between. How can civilizations lacking wheel or iron shape such feats? Conventional explanation falters, myth steps forth offering clarity. These were remnants of knowledge older, carried by those remembering architecture of another world, their hands guiding Earth's children in replicating what once graced Martian plains. Atlantis re-emerges in every stone that resists time, each monument standing as silent witness to presence of strangers among humanity's dawn. Such survivors would not have sought to replicate Empire of Mars, for world here was different, resources fewer, humanity still young. Instead they may have woven themselves gently into the societies they touched, teaching without domination, seeding wisdom without empire. Over generations, memory blurred, presence dissolved into story. Yet their essence remained, preserved in ritual, temple, stone, story. Thus myths across continents converge without contact, not because cultures spoke to one another, but because teachers from Mars spoke to them all. Even language bears clues. Myths are filled with motifs of circular cities, concentric patterns of water and land, golden metals shining like sun, crystal towers radiant with power. These are not inventions of agrarian imaginations, they are memories, refracted, imperfect yet persistent. Plato's account of Atlantis has those motifs intact: rings of canals and land, precious metals gleaming, vast fertile plains. He may not have conjured them at all but inherited them from surviving traditions older than Greece, themselves echoes of memories older even than Earth's civilizations. Atlantis described not an island in ocean, but memory of Mars transposed into earthly metaphor. His account, far from allegory, may be best preserved fragment of Martian story itself, stripped of cosmic dimension yet rich enough for recognition. To sense Atlantis in myth of gods, in temples of stone, in knowledge of sky, is not to diminish humanity's own genius. It is instead to acknowledge that we may be fruit grown upon seeds planted from elsewhere. The Sumerians, Egyptians, Maya each developed brilliance of their own, yet their first sparks may have been helped by those carrying embers from a dying fire. That fire was Mars, Atlantis above. The embers were exiles, wanderers, survivors. And we their descendants carry both origins, of Earth's soil and Mars' memory. Within us meet two lineages, terrestrial growth and cosmic inheritance. Such duality may explain our restless spirit, our enduring urge to look skyward. For we are children of two homes, never complete until we remember both. Strangely, modern science strengthens this vision. Genetic research suggests sudden expansions of intelligence and symbolic thinking in early humans, leaps still unexplained by gradual mutation. Archaeology continues to reveal sophistication far older than previously imagined, sites of Göbekli Tepe, with megalithic carvings 12,000 years old, predating agriculture yet aligned with stars inexplicable and less guided by knowledge not yet born. Each discovery nudges us closer to recognition that story is more complex than we assume. Each aligns quietly with myth whispered by Plato, a prior age, advanced, undone, remembered through fragments. Science and myth converge, circling truth like planets orbiting unseen center. That center may be Mars, Atlantis of sky, origin masked by time. As we journey through this narrative, one sees continuity forming. Catastrophe force migration. Migration seeded myth. Myth raised civilizations. Civilizations preserved echoes, embedding them into stone, sky, right. Then memory blurred, leaving Plato millennia later to gather whispers into text. And now, in our age, science uncovers Mars anew, finds water in stone, finds riverbeds in sand. The circle closes slowly yet inevitably. We stand ready at threshold of rediscovery. Soon, perhaps, explorers will place hand on Martian rock shaped by intelligence, silent yet eloquent, proving what myth maintained all along. That moment will awaken humanity not to alien presence but ancestral return. Therefore the search for Atlantis is not fruitless. It has simply been misdirected. The city lies not beneath ocean waves but beneath Martian dust. Its survivors walked Earth as gods, its memory became myth, its wisdom seeded dawn. And today, as we stretch again into heavens, we walk path already traveled. We are not first to journey through void, we follow ancestors exiled by ruin. Atlantis was Mars, Mars was Atlantis, and we are its legacy. If fragments of a lost civilization from Mars truly walked among early humanity, their influence would extend beyond architecture, myth, and astronomy. It would sink deeper, into the very marrow of human evolution, shaping not only the outward forms of culture but also the inner capacities of mind and spirit. For what is civilization if not the awakening of memory and imagination in a species once bound only to necessity? And if such awakening came suddenly, in leaps too vast for mere accident, then perhaps it was the spark of another world, woven into our own destiny. The story of humanity is full of abrupt thresholds. For millions of years, hominids roamed with tools of stone, their lives painted upon the canvas of survival. Then, seemingly at once, symbols arose: cave paintings of bison and deer, handprints on rock walls speaking across tens of thousands of years, abstract shapes suggesting vision beyond mere survival. From symbol came art, from art came myth, from myth came civilization. This leap, so sharp, so unlikely, leaves us questioning, how did it ignite? If survivors of Martian Atlantis blended among us, carrying memory not only as myth but as genetic inheritance, then perhaps their spark mingled with ours, pushing human mind toward possibilities it would otherwise have reached only in distant future. The flowering of consciousness may thus be legacy of fusion, earth-born body, Mars-born memory. Consider the sudden rise of agriculture. For untold ages, humans hunted and gathered, following rhythms of nature's abundance. Then, in scattered places, knowledge of seed and cycle emerged. The planting of crops, the tilling of soil, the domestication of animals, these arose not in slow universal spread but in pockets, bursts of ingenuity as though taught, remembered, transplanted. Sumer blossomed in Mesopotamia, Egypt flowered by Nile, Indus Valley teemed with complexity, Mesoamerica nurtured maize. Why at once, in unconnected places, did such revolutions unfold? The mythic answer is that teachers brought it, strangers descending with knowledge. The speculative answer is that survivors of Mars seeded it, carrying memory of cultivation from their lost plains into the fresh soil of Earth. Thus agricultural dawn was not simple human discovery, but continuation of practices born out of survival upon a dying planet. Nor was knowledge only practical. The patterns embedded in myth reveal something subtler, an inheritance of worldview. From earliest civilizations, humans carried instinct to measure time in cycles, to read heavens, to encode morality through cosmic stories. Flood myths resonate not only as cultural coincidence but as residual trauma memory of a world undone by catastrophe, reshaped, cast anew. Stories of gods angry at hubris are not simple morality tales, but reflections of lived experience, retold across unfamiliar land. For those who lost Mars, their pride, their wars, their desperate struggles during collapse would remain vivid. Passed on to Earth's tribes, it became coded into parable warnings clothed in story, carried through generations as if to ensure lesson would not be forgotten. When Plato centuries later spoke of Atlantis consumed by pride and struck down by divine wrath, he tapped directly into this inheritance of warning, echo of venerable trauma far older than Greece itself. Architecture, myth, agriculture, these form only surface. Deeper shifts may have carried into human biology itself. If survivors of Mars did not remain apart but hybridized with early humans, then their legacy may live in our very blood. This is suggestion not of alien intrusion but of continuity. Life may have seeded both planets from common source. Survivors thus were not wholly other, but kin separated by world. When reunion occurred, strands entwined, and new capacity emerged. Hybrid vigor is known in biology, and so too may cosmic hybrid have lent leap in human intellect, capacity for abstraction, for self-conscious thought, for longing that exceeds need. This may explain why humanity alone among Earth's creatures yearns endlessly for stars. We gaze upward because a fraction of our lineage remembers living beneath different one. We dream of space not as conquest, but return to ancestral sky. Meditate upon humanity's restless urge. Why do we build telescopes to peer into vastness? Why do we launch vessels into darkness? Why do we look to Mars as future home? Why Mars, not other planets, draws such longing? Rational answers speak of proximity, of potential, of similarity. But hearts whisper deeper reason, memory. We pursue Red Planet not only for science but for soul. We seek it because we once knew it, because its desert is not foreign but familiar, because within us sings quiet recognition the feeling of lost home awaiting return. This longing itself may be Martian inheritance, Atlantis whispering through veins, guiding humanity not toward expansion but remembrance. Yet within heritage lies burden. If Atlantis upon Mars fell through hubris, if pride and rivalry hasten collapse, then same shadow accompanies us. Memory of loss encoded into myth warns endlessly, do not repeat. Flood myths, Atlantis, legends of gods punishing arrogance, they echo lessons survivors carried here, hoping to protect us from fate endured upon their own world. And yet, as we gaze upon Earth, swelling populations, strained ecosystems, atmosphere threatened by imbalance, we see warning repeating. History may not be circle, but spiral. Atlantis fell once. Atlantis may fall again. The gift of survivors was not only knowledge, but warning: preserve balance, honor nature, fear hubris. To forget is to invite repetition. To remember is gift of survival echoing across planets. From temple inscriptions to stone alignments, from mythic cycles to genetic leaps, evidence of inheritance shines faint but persistent. Each piece may be denied in isolation, yet together they form resonance too profound to ignore. They speak of civilization undone, of survivors scattered, of myth seeded, of legacies entwined with ours. Atlantis becomes not story of one lost land, but foundation of humanity's very rise. We are not only heirs of Earth but heirs of Mars. We bear grief of two worlds, hope of two beginnings, burden of repeating cycle. To know this is to awaken not only to mystery of past, but to responsibility of present, guardian of fragile world, student of memory, bearer of warning echoing eternal. And yet even as burden, it is also wonder. For it means we are more vast than we thought, written not only upon Earth's soil but upon stars. Our consciousness stretches across gulfs unknowable, our memory older than any record, our destiny wider than horizons. Atlantis is not gone. It is within us, encoded in dreams that rise each time we gaze at Mars. It waits for us, as we wait for ourselves, for the day we step once more upon red dust and recognize shadow of our own reflection looking back. That moment will not be discovery. It will be remembrance, a reunion long prepared, completion of circle drawn by time itself. Thus Part 8 moves deeper into possibility, humanity as continuation of Atlantis, as children of Mars. Myth ceases to be distant allegory, it becomes autobiography written in stars. And in hearing it, we find not only sleep, but dream, a dream older than world we walk, stretching back to plains of lost homeland, forward to journeys awaiting still. Atlantis was Mars. Atlantis is us. And its story drifts onward, like lullaby sung through cosmic night. In our age, the story of Mars no longer sleeps only in legend. Instruments circle above it, rovers crawl across its plains, cameras focus upon its stones. What was once the fabric of myth and speculation becomes strand by strand the domain of science. Yet still, the resonance remains the same resonance that lingers in Plato's prose, in Egyptian temples, in Mayan calendars, in whispering myths that drift down corridors of time. The difference now is only method. Where ancients told stories by firelight, we now send signals across millions of kilometers, telescopic eyes peering into silence. But the essence is unchanged. Humanity still seeks Atlantis, still seeks lost home, still yearns for contact with origins thought forgotten. Orbiters were the first to return whispers of that ancient memory. The Mariner missions of the mid-20th century revealed landscapes of craters, deserts, and canyon silent ruins of a world undone. They stripped Mars of its romantic canals, disproving Lowell's visions, yet in their place offered something subtler and deeper. Images spoke of valleys carved not by fantasy but by water. Channels twisted across the face of Mars, dried riverbeds dry for billions of years, yet still whispering of seas and rains. These rivers, frozen in time, bore silent testimony that Mars had once been alive, once had flow, once had climate perhaps not unlike our own. They revealed Atlantis not as allegory of ocean alone, but as memory of water lost, proving that myth of drowned world resonates with history of Red Planet itself. Later missions deepened the story. Viking landers touched down on dusty plains, scraping soil for chemical traces, their instruments searching for breath of life. Their findings were ambiguous chemical puzzles sparking debate, unresolved whispers suggesting possibility though never proof. Yet among their photographs came images that stirred imagination of dreamers, formations in region of Cydonia, mesas shaped by play of shadow into visages resembling a face. Though later shown as illusion of light and slope, the impact remained profound. Across Earth, voices whispered perhaps ruins, perhaps carved monuments. For believers in Atlantis beyond Earth, it was fuel, a suggestion that ancient memory carved into Martian stone persisted still, awaiting recognition. Even when explained away, the cultural echo endured. For myth does not bow easily to data. It waits, adapting, whispering still. As decades passed, new eyes arrived. Mars Global Surveyor mapped surface with clarity. Odyssey revealed hidden ice below crust. Phoenix lander tasted frozen water directly. Curiosity rover wandered Gale Crater, finding sediments layered as by lakes billions of years past. Perseverance, newest pilgrim, now studies delta once built by ancient river, sampling stone for signs of organic memory long gone. Each mission strengthens picture, Mars was never desert alone. It wore waters like crown, bore climate soft enough for rivers to run, harbored chemistry necessary for spark of life. Science thus redeems myth. Atlantis drowned not in ocean, but in sky. Mars perished, yet left behind enough trace to prove once it was alive. Myth and data converge slowly, asymptotic lines drawing closer. And yet science is not merely confirming past. It reaches toward possibility of future. Instruments listen for methane size, measure seasonal cycles of gas, suggesting planet may not be fully dead. Subsurface may yet hide warmth, pockets where water lingers, niches where life waits in slumber. If microbes persist, they are testament that Mars is not silent but pause, the story not ended but resting. And if life persists, however humble, then Atlantis is not memory alone but continuity. To find Martian life is to find proof Atlantis was truth, not in totality but in essence. It shows civilization may not have sprung from void, but from ancestors upon dying world. Thus each laboratory aboard rover is priest of new myth, each spectrometer a prophet scanning soil for whispers of origin. Meanwhile, telescopes from afar chart atmosphere, trace seasons, watch storms swirl across red plains. Satellites measure canyons so vast as to humble imagination, Vies Marineris yawning across planet-like scar eternal. Olympus Mons towers higher than any mountain upon earth, testimony to volcanoes that once shook heavens. Beneath, seismic sensors now listen for heartbeat, mapping hollow places that may yet hide caverns untrodden. All speak of planet older, grander, once vibrant, now sleeping yet not forgotten. Science sees with clarity, but heart hears in myth the story of Atlantis undone upon cosmic shore. This convergence of myth and data reshapes humanity's imagination. Literature, art, cinema all return to Mars endlessly, dramatizing voyages, invasions, contacts, romances. Why this fixation? Why has no other planet stirred same fascination? Because memory guides it. We are drawn not only by curiosity but by recognition, unconscious inheritance pressing into dream. Atlantis, retold through Plato, reappears through every new Mars story: loss, hope, return, survival, tragedy mixed with destiny. To dream of Mars is to relive memory encoded within psychic fabric of humanity, whispering of homeland lost, beacon awaiting return. Our technological age now makes possible what myth long suggested. Rockets, probes, laboratories, all steps along cosmic pilgrimage. Plans for crewed missions grow firmer by decade. Colonies imagined not merely as conquest but as rebirth, second chance upon soil once fertile. When first human steps onto Martian plain, it will be more than historic, it will be myth's fulfillment, dream's completion, exile's return. For if survivors once came here, we now return there. The circle completes. Humanity finds itself not new occupant but heir, laying hand once more upon soil of Atlantis, raising torch once fallen into silence. The implications shake foundation of identity. If life is found, if ruin someday uncovered beneath Martian dust, then history rewrites itself. Humanity ceases to be singular miracle of Earth, becomes descendant of dual heritage, child of both soil and star. Myth proves not fantasy but memory. Plato ceases to speak allegory, his Atlantis becomes recovered history disguised. Millennium-long search for drowned kingdom reveals itself not beneath waves but in heavens. Civilization's origin is not linear, but cosmic cycle, world to world, ruin to rebirth. And if such revelation occurs, what lessons does it teach? It teaches fragility, planets die, seas vanish, skies collapse. It teaches responsibility, to cherish shield of our Earth, not let hubris invite ruin repeated. Above all, it teaches continuity, life travels, survives, remembers, seeds anew where soil offers welcome. We, as humanity, are testimony of resilience. If we indeed carry legacy of Mars, then we embody Atlantis not as victim but as survivor. Our very existence shows story did not end. It changed form. Memory lives on in us, dream lives on in myth, and now future opens for remembrance in full. Science advances toward this truth with care, yet myth already knows it with certainty. Two streams flow toward same sea. Instruments record minerals, myth remembers floods. Sensors detect methane, myth remembers life. Cameras show riverbeds, myth remembers canals. Together they reinforce one another, two halves of harmony preparing to meet at last. When we speak of Atlantis as Mars, we stand not alone in imagination. We stand upon threshold where myth is confirmed, where evidence intertwines story, and where humanity awakens as child not of one world, but of many. Thus Part 9 rests not as conclusion but as preparation. For next comes question of meaning, what discovery changes in who we are and what we seek. If Atlantis was Mars, and Mars was our origin, then future unfolds not as conquest of stars but as reunion. Science is not ending of myth. It is its continuation, its rediscovery, its translation into language of numbers and images. And through it, humanity rediscovers itself. Good evening, dear listener. As you settle into stillness, perhaps lying down in the quiet of your room, breathing softly in the dim glow of night, I invite you to travel one last time with me through the dream of worlds, through myth and memory, through silence and stars. We have wandered far together across oceans of thought, across deserts of dust, across ruins buried in both Earth and Mars. Now, in this final part of our story, we return not to past alone, but to the heart of present and the vision of future. Tonight, as you listen, as your eyelids grow heavy, let us linger upon what it all means. What if Atlantis was not land beneath sea, but planet above sky? What if we ourselves carry its legacy? And what does awakening to this truth reveal about the journey still awaiting us? Let us rest once more in the silence of imagination and let the images come slowly, gently, like waves rolling in the distance. Imagine humanity now, poised between two destinies. On one side lies Earth, lush and fragile, our home, a sanctuary of seas and forests, mountain ranges and fields. On the other side lies Mars, silent, stark, yet whispering always. Between the two lies story we have traced, Atlantis as memory of Mars, myth as inheritance, survival as destiny. If this is true even in part, then we are unusual creatures indeed. We are heirs not of one cradle, but of two. We are children of Earth, born in green valleys, but also children of Mars, shaped by memories of red deserts that we never walked with our current feet, yet remember with our deeper being. We are, in essence, wanderers by inheritance, survivors by blood, dreamers by necessity. To awaken to this dual heritage is to feel vastness within us. No longer common, no longer singularly bound, humanity stretches across time and space, bridging two worlds. Our origin is not a straight line rising from simplicity to complexity, but a web interlaced with stars. When Plato wrote down Atlantis in measured prose, perhaps he preserved more than allegory. Perhaps he captured final echo of ancient grief, the grief of a world undone, told by descendants cloaking memory in story. And while scholars have debated for centuries, while divers search beneath oceans, while archaeologists sift sands for drowned temples, the truth may have waited above us, glowing red in evening sky, hiding in plain sight all along. What then is Atlantis? It is grief given voice. It is memory recast. It is warning delivered through allegory. But it is also promise. Far from being only a tale of ruin, it is also a tale reminding us that survival is possible, that exile may continue into rebirth, that even when a planet dies, its legacy can cross void and blossom anew. When we dream of Atlantis, we dream of both tragedy and hope. And what then is Mars? To scientists, it is neighbor world, destination for exploration, goal for colonization. To poets, it is symbol of longing, embodiment of struggle and passion. To myth, it is homeland lost. To us, here and now, it is mirror. In its deserts we see fragility of our own earth. In its vanished atmosphere we see warning of future that could come. In its silence we hear echo of our own potential silence, should we forget balance. But in its memory we hear also dream that life travels, survives, waits, returns. The duality defines our journey. Atlantis is lesson, pride leads to fall, imbalance calls collapse. Mars is lesson, worlds are fragile, no civilization eternal. Together they remind us not to take Earth for granted. Together they guide us toward vision of balance, humility, and continuity. To remember Atlantis as Mars is not to live in fantasy. It is to awaken to responsibility. Myths exist because memory of pain must endure to warn the future. That future is now. And so, as humanity prepares its vessels, tests rockets, builds engines for journey across void, we are not launching simply into new frontier. We are answering ancient call. We are completing circle exiles began. If Atlanteans in truth Martian survivors once fled here, now we walk their road in reverse, returning to sands of their lost homeland. The first footstep of a human upon Martian soil will not be first at all. It will be reunion, long overdue. Imagine that moment. A spacecraft landing upon wide plain. Dust rising softly, sunlight thin, sky faded pink. The hatch opens, a figure steps down ladder. Foot presses into soil dry for eons. That step will echo not only through history but through myth. For when that foot presses down, Atlantis awakens. What was myth becomes memory rediscovered, what was dream becomes reality. Humanity will look around and realize we are not visiting foreign planet. We are walking home, long forgotten, long abandoned, but never erased from story. That day will not be conquest, it will be return of children to cradle split by fate, and memory of Atlantis will close its long arc. But before that day comes, we wait in dream. We tell story again and again so it will not fade. The myth has endured for thousands of years because within it memory breathes. Each listener tonight is part of that long chain, keepers of memory, dreamers of story. By listening, by imagining, you are part of remembrance older than history itself. We speak Atlantis and Mars not to entertain, but to preserve continuity of soul, to remind us who we might be. Atlantis was Mars. And we are its children. Let us, then, rest in that thought. Close eyes gently. Picture endless dunes beneath red sky. Picture oceans long gone but shimmering still in memory. Picture temples aligned to stars, pyramids rising under thin clouds, cities shining in golden plains. Picture their end, but also picture their journey, exiles stepping into void, carrying hope, carrying grief, carrying possibility. Picture them arriving here, walking our earth, becoming teachers, becoming gods in story, becoming ancestors. Their whispers become myths, their grief becomes lore, their warnings become parables. And now, centuries later, we hear them again, not in temples but in rovers' signals, in telescopes' images, in myths retold tonight. Past and present meet. Atlantis was never only about ruin. Atlantis was always about survival, transformation, memory kept alive. It teaches us survival is not of stone but of story. Civilizations fall, planets change, oceans dry. But memory persists encoded in myths, written in stars, whispered across ages. And when we choose to listen, when we finally awaken, memory becomes guidance. The death of one world becomes salvation for another. Such is gift of Atlantis. Such is gift of Mars. Now, dear listener, as you drift into sleep, take with you this vision. You are descendant not of one world but of two. You are bearer of dual inheritance, flesh of Earth, memory of Mars. Destiny awaits not in conquest but in remembrance, not in domination but reunion. Atlantis is not gone. It rises each time you gaze at red star in night sky, each time you dream of other worlds, each time you feel longing that cannot be explained. Atlantis is within you, calling you softly toward destiny written across stars. So rest now. Let your breath slow, let mine drift, let stars rise above you. Atlantis waits. Mars waits. And in your dreams tonight, perhaps you will walk silently on red sands, feel wind stir ancient dust, hear whispers of ancestors far older than Earth. Perhaps you will remember what your heart already knows: Atlantis lives in you. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Good night, and may your dreams carry you gently back to the memory of other worlds.